Welcome back, everybody. CTH Podcast here, episode number 8. It's only 8. Jeez. But here we are again. So today we have a guest here who's I think it's the first guest that we have that we're inviting from that's based in the US. That's where I live. So it's pretty ironic that this is our first guest from the US, but I finally made my recruitment here. His name is Jase Kim. So just to give you a brief introduction about Jase, obviously a lifelong football guy, but he started his career in football. Well, I think he worked in football before that too, so I guess he can do more of an explaining for us. But I guess his first well-known job in football was he was the team analyst for the New Zealand national team. Where he was actually able to do a lot of big things. You know, he was at the Confederations Cup. I believe he was about a game away from qualifying for the World Cup. And then in 2018, he started working in MLS with Colorado Rapids. He's still here. If for those of you who don't know, especially in MLS, I almost feel like team analysts, a lot of them sort of just like come and go. I see a lot of them just like coming and going, but Jase has already been here for about 5 years now, which is pretty impressive. And one thing that makes Jase really interesting, though, is that, yes, he has only been with one team in MLS, but he's pretty much been everywhere in the sense that he has fought at the top of MLS at one point. He has also fought at the bottom, too. He has fought in the middle as well. So he's kind of been through the ups and downs in this MLS Major League Soccer over the last 5 years or so. Without further ado, Jase, how's it going, brother?
Thank you for having me on this podcast. Yeah, it's been a tough season for us this year. We're experiencing that bottom of the table season, and we haven't done well. But like you said, like 2 years ago, we were top of the West. So I think that shows how tough this league can be, because we have certain restrictions when it comes to salary caps that normal football leagues don't have. And I know in Europe, they're trying to implement more and more of that to make the leagues much more competitive. But it just shows you, like, it's a very competitive league in itself. Like in regards to like not comparing it to the other leagues, but within it, it's always competitive. So it's good to be involved in something that's always competitive, and you learn from your mistakes and you go on from the bad season to experience the better season that's coming up. So hopefully we can turn it around this off season. We'll get the ground running, so we'll go from there. No, it was only in 2021, right, when you guys won the when you guys won the Western Conference. Yeah, what a season that was. That was a really strange season too, though. I mean, not strange because you guys did well, but what I'm saying is it was a very strange season in the sense that, you know, LAFC didn't even make it to the playoffs that season. You guys eliminated them in the last game. We actually eliminated LAFC. Yeah, like, didn't you guys score 5 goals past them in the last game of the season? Right? So that was a really memorable game. It was a very interesting last decision day. We called it day in America. Yeah. So because we beat LAFC, they didn't make the playoffs, and at the same time, we actually got into the game as third place team. And we needed the other top 2 teams to draw. Yeah, I remember. And that all happened simultaneously. And so you could say the fortune favored us, but at the same time, I do think like we had a really, really good season. No, that was a team. You guys had a team over there 2 years ago. Yeah. Like it was almost disappointing to me that you guys didn't go further in the playoffs. Really. Honestly, that playoff game in itself just shows you like. I'm reminding you, man. Yeah, I know. But what people don't know is like the scheduling also matters a lot in club football. Yeah. And winner of the conference had to wait 3 to 3.5 weeks until we played that playoff game. Yeah. Because there was an international window in between. I remember. Yeah. And the winner of the conference gets a bye. Yeah. So they have a qualifying game. It's like round of 16 game.
The play-in.
Yeah, play-in
Yeah.
game, they call it in America. And we had to wait for that. We lost a game of playing.
Mhm.
So we didn't have a game for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's the only excuse that why we didn't
Sure.
make it.
Yeah, but yeah.
Ultimately it has an effect because it's
Sure.
football is a game that you have to be
Yeah.
players have to be, doing the same things week in, week out, and we didn't have that. So that had an impact on us.
Yeah. We'll get into that in a little bit, but we also have Young-hoon here, as always. Young-hoon, all the way from Korea here. So we are across 3 different time zones to record this. We have one guy in Denver, Colorado, one guy in LA, and another guy in Korea. Young-hoon, how are you, man? How have you been?
I'm good. Actually, it's a little bit weird because now I'm in the morning and you guys are in the afternoon. Normally, we did
Sure.
it. We made it
The
other way around. Yeah.
around. So, but it's okay. It's all good, and maybe we can chat like normal days, like previous episodes.
Let me ask you this though: Major League Soccer. What kind of reputation does Major League Soccer have in Korea? I mean, I know a little bit too, but I feel like you have a better idea because you're over there. What do people over there, the football fandom over there in Korea, what's sort of like the image of MLS in Korea?
But first of all, I don't know. The image that I have is common thing because I'm
Sure.
a little bit weird because
you're a
not
football
that
guy.
normal,
Yeah.
so, but in my head, the image of MLS, first thing is the salary cap, because for example, now Spain has their own law to control the salary, so now the league wants to control and wants to have that balance in the league, because before they didn't have, and there was so huge chaos in the league, so they have many crises, etc. So I think as a coach, that thing comes in my mind first, and later maybe some European players. There are so many cases like I liked Alessandro Nesta so much, and if I'm not wrong, he
Montreal.
Montreal,
Yeah.
and there were so many Italian players. Now Messi is there, and I liked Carlos Vela so much, and he made some history already. He already made some history in LA too. So those kind of players are there, and maybe I'm not sure. Because I don't have that experience as a coach in MLS, but I'm quite sure there is some similar quality as Europe, I think.
Yeah, and our guest here, Jase, he is an interesting guy, man. Like that's like the first thing that came to my mind, like since the first day I met him. Korean guy, obviously just like us, just like me, from New Zealand, working in America. You don't really get a lot of those. He's a very special person. Yeah, it makes him very special because like he's one of a kind. No, seriously, he even has like a Kiwi accent, as you can tell. So Jase, I'm going to take you back a little bit. Just going to the set of questions that we prepared for you here. If you can take us back a little bit to how your career in football started, because that's what kind of interests me. I mean, you told me about this when we were talking, just off the record, but the start of your career in New Zealand, it almost seems like your first official job, I don't know if official is the right word for this, but was the team analyst position with the New Zealand national team starting in 2014. 2014 was a year when New Zealand played in the World Cup.
It's not quite true. I didn't start as an analyst.
Mhm.
So what actually happened was I wanted to get into football so badly that I just started getting coaching badges, like football coaching badges. I went to Australia to get a badge. And then I just threw myself into the football field, like literally apply for every job in local clubs. And then there was like about 3 years of me not making any money.
Yeah.
Driving like 4 hours a day to just do one training. And I tried to become a coach. So that's how it all began.
Yeah.
And a series of that, and obviously I put a lot of effort into it. Like the coaches started recognizing the effort that I was putting in.
Yeah.
And they started taking me into these certain roles where I was an assistant coach for one of the local clubs. And then the year after, I applied for another better club. And then they took me on board. And these kinds of things kept on happening. And through luck also, I got to meet a very, very awesome coach that actually was at the time working as an assistant coach for the under-20s New Zealand team. So he actually said, we have this guy that can, like, I was already doing some work, but it was a very amateur analyst work at the time. Like, just actually just filming and like literally just clipping basic clips, putting highlights together. Like, I don't know how to do an actual analyst work. So I was very fortunate enough for that coach that was the assistant coach of the under-20s team to take me on board to the under-20s head coach. And he liked what I did, and I started working for the under-20s team. And luckily that year, the coming year was when New Zealand hosted the under-20 World Cup.
You're right.
So obviously it was a major event in the country, and I was lucky to be a part of it. But at the same time, our head coach of the national team changed.
Yeah.
And what was really funny was that the national team didn't have an analyst at that time.
Like, so let me take you back on this.
Honestly,
so they never had an analyst before that?
They didn't have a full-time position for it. There were people that filled in the roles here and there in competition, but nobody full-time. And that's why when we got the new coach for the national team, and his name is Anthony Hudson. So I'm sure you'll talk about him in some questions, but he was the one who came in from Bahrain under-23s, Bahrain national team at the time.
Yeah.
And then he specifically wanted the analyst. So they started posting for the job. And at that time, I was working for the under-20s because we had a World Cup coming up. And like, he's like, I need an analyst right now. So he literally said, we need to use him, not for the 20s, but for the national team. So it was like a little trial run.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to ask you. So Anthony Hudson kind of, I mean, obviously you were there, like, but the fact is that he kind of handpicked you to be in that role. Yeah, but what is it though? Like, what did you do to make that happen?
Like, I don't think I've done too much. Like I said, I think my enthusiasm towards like being involved, and my work ethic, like, because at that time and even now, I work very hard. I try to do as much as I can. I spend a lot of time. And all of that sort of, gave me a chance to, I wouldn't say handpick because he didn't have that many options. Not many people want to come to New Zealand to do a role, to get paid. At the time, it would have been like something like 52K, it's very hard to recruit somebody that's working in like even championship of in England, an analyst there, to come all the way to New Zealand, which is like nowhere. And so that gave me a competitive edge to get that role. If that answers your question. At the same time, I do think I did make my luck, and I honestly said, like, I had a conversation with him because I had a tour. We went to China. That was my first tour with the national team. We played China, then we played Thailand. We actually drew with China, which is actually a decent result. Woodsy scored that game. 87th minute. Anyway, after that, he was like, yeah, but I'm looking for someone who can do a little bit more and more. I'm like, nobody's actually taught me how to do this stuff. So I think I can be quite good at it if you teach me the ways and nurture me. And I don't know if you know, but Anthony is a very meticulous guy. He sets high standards. He works very hard, and he has a very big drive, towards
Sure.
what he wants to achieve.
Yeah.
And I think like my energy fit into that somewhat, and I wanted to do well for him as well for me. And then it worked out, and I had a very good working relationship with him for a long time.
Yeah, no, but that speaks volume though, because Anthony Hudson, obviously, he's a very well-respected coach. He's somebody with a reputation for being a student of the game. He's a very studious coach too. But a lot of people, Jase, I'm not even going to lie to you, a lot of people find it difficult to work with him sometimes. Not you, apparently, but a lot of people do, bro. So what I wanted to ask you was, you and I have talked a lot about this, about Anthony Hudson, how much you learned from him, how much of an opportunity it was for you to work with him and all that. But I'm sure it was extremely demanding for you. But, also, like you said, I'm sure it was a great learning experience for you too, as you were starting your career as an analyst. What were some things that you learned from him? And because he's unlike a typical coach, especially, in a traditional sense, he's a little different based on what I've heard. And would your career have turned out to be a little bit different if your first boss wasn't Anthony Hudson?
I think so very much. Anthony, like I said, his drive is like you can't match it. You know what I mean? Like it just his drive to do well, to succeed, to get to the top level that he believes in, like unparalleled. That drive has taught me to push myself at a younger age where I didn't know much. And he's a student of the game, like you said.
Yeah.
He's gone to many, many study trips to see Bielsa. He went to see Allegri at Juventus. He went to see Conte. He saw all these top coaches, and then he's learned a lot from them by being the student of the game. So he taught himself by watching the best practices of the best coaches that he believed in, and that made his football philosophy. And just by doing that and watching that alone gave me the will to become at a better level. And obviously, when you keep on watching the best people do the best jobs at their game, you just have to learn, and I think that was probably what I needed the most at the time.
Yeah.
And what I learned the most, like I said, is his drive to do well and set higher standards. And that's what I did in my role. I always went on study trips. I actually went on study trips to see the All Blacks, which is rugby.
Yeah.
I went to, this is more recent. I went to Arsenal because I have the connection with the company, the club.
Sure. Yeah.
But I went to many of those, where I don't just sit there and just go, "Oh, I'm doing all right." I want to get better. I want to see the best people in the job, get the best out of what they're doing, and try and improve from it by watching.
I'm looking at your journey now, and you've now worked with, after Anthony Hudson, you've worked with a couple other coaches as well. As recently you worked with Robin Fraser, who was there for a few years as well and did well in Colorado. From an analyst perspective, what I wanted to ask you was, how much of the way you work, your workflow, I guess, or the way you go about your day to day, in terms of your work, how much of that is impacted by the head coach?
That's a hard question to answer.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if you're a young coach or an analyst that's working with a head coach, you can be more affected easily because you don't really have a true color and you don't have that confidence of how good you are in your role. And that's why experience matters a lot in every job. But it goes the same in any coaching role or any analyst role. I believe if you have that caliber of belief that you're doing the top job, I think then the head coach doesn't matter as much. Whereas when you're just in that breed of getting into the game and
Yeah.
actually learning a lot. So like, in those moments, I think whoever is a head coach can matter a little bit more. So to just explain more in layman's terms, I would say I was very fortunate to have Anthony first, and then Robin, who's more like freer. He actually like would give me a job and go, "Can you look for this?" And like he doesn't like give me the specifics. But he's like, "I want you to go and find like what you."
He wants you to figure it out, right?
Yeah. So if it had happened the other way around, I think I would have found it a bit more difficult. Because at that time when I was working for Anthony, I didn't have the self-confidence because like I'm learning and my level of football knowledge is not where it is right now. So obviously I will try to get the stuff that they want.
Sure.
But it won't be a certain level because your knowledge of the game is behind.
Yeah.
Whereas with Robin, like I've had a fair bit of experience. I've worked with some really, really great players. I've worked at a decent level where, like you said, we went to the Confeds Cup. We played against Peru in the World Cup qualifiers. Obviously, it's not as big stage as working in the World Cup, which I would have loved to.
You were 1 or 2 games away from it.
We were literally 1 game away from it. Because, we were 0-0 in the first game, and the second game we went away. We were and lost the game. So
that's a tough place to win too, man.
Mate, that game was intense. Like we went there like two nights before. Every night, 3 a.m. Peru fans, fireworks.
I'm not surprised.
On the day of the game, they actually flew over a jet plane across
over your hotel.
Over our hotel, like circling it for like 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's mad. Because they haven't made the World Cup in 52 years, I believe. That's what.
Let me ask you this though: was that the most intense game of football that you've ever been involved in?
1,000%.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Like I have so many stories. Like, you know, the bus that was going to the stadium on the day of the game.
Right.
They got us a bus. It traveled literally like 10 to 15 miles per hour, slow as it can. And then once it got there, they got a bus that was so high that it wouldn't fit in the tunnel.
Oh wow!
So they
could that? Wow!
Everything to go against wrong, like it just to shake us, you know. Like fireworks, jet planes, and
these guys are doing that to New Zealand. Jesus, man!
It doesn't matter who they're playing.
I guess it doesn't.
It's their home, so we want to go to the World Cup.
Yeah,
so the whole government gets involved in it.
Right, and I guess for them, they haven't been to the World Cup in almost like forever, so it was. I guess it was like a really big deal. Yeah,
too. Like any time that you go to South America or even Mexico, fans are crazy about that because they're so passionate.
Yeah,
that's what I really love about the game and the most intense game that I've lived.
So that makes me wonder though, like from an analytical standpoint, because that's what you do. From an analytical standpoint, you go into a game like that off the pitch. I mean, obviously, I would imagine it affects the team. As an analyst, like, how does your preparation, like, how difficult is it to transfer that over to a 90-minute game in an atmosphere like that?
I mean, it does put you off because, like, it just makes you more nervous.
Of course.
And when you're nervous, like, anyone just gets affected. Like, if you're a player, your coach, your decision-making is a bit slower. Just affects you, and I think it's just a part of the game. And like I said, I think that's where the experiences come in. So let's just say if you're a coach that's been to the World Cup 3 times, and you've already had to deal with that kind of stuff that I dealt with in Peru, it doesn't affect you as much, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
Whereas if it's your first time, and like say you're an 18-year-old player that just made the national team, and you're the best player in that team. That's the start in that game, you know. You're nervous as hell, like, so it's definitely going to affect you. And like I said, it's just a part of the game that we have to, you know, cherish. And
like this is what really it always makes me curious about your professional experience in New Zealand. Like we talked a lot about this, like since I've known you, but you know, they're obviously New Zealand. They're the strongest team in the region.
Yes, they are.
And they've also had some, number of players playing at the top level in European football too.
Mhm.
But it's difficult for them because they're in the region of the world where it's really difficult for them to get competitive games to drive themselves to build a proper campaign for tournaments like the World Cup and what have you. But so like throughout your experience there, like if you can just like kind of share with us, how difficult was it to navigate through that as you were trying to build this team towards the World Cup? And what were some things that you learned during your time there to maybe like, because I'm assuming that it gave you this, I'm not sure if it would have given you the knowledge, but it probably gave you the experience of like, maybe you learned a thing or two on how you can help teams like this to kind of sustain their competitiveness as they, strive to contend to compete at tournaments like the World Cup and the Confederations Cup and things like that. Like what was that difficulty like, and how do you navigate through something like that to stay competitive?
It's like it's not. I don't think it can ever be competitive in a way.
Really? Okay.
Of football, football against football.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's always going to be ability-wise,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be night and day.
Yeah.
What's going to make it competitive is all the other things that surrounds it. Just like the Peru game that goes against you, like you turn up and you're a professional player that plays in like the Premier League, like Winston Reid did, at the time, and then we'll suddenly be training like in Solomon Islands or Papua New Guinea.
Yeah.
Pitch is like worse than a normal school field.
Sure. Yeah.
And those kind of things mentally affect those top players because now they start thinking about, if I get injured training in this, then like they go back to their club and like they could have an ACL injury or their meniscus couldn't go, whatever. Like, but if that affects it, then their career is ruined, and they're not want that either. So, like, and the refereeing level at that level is horrendous too, and like the weather in those islands, one of the worst. Like, I'm just standing. Obviously during the game, I'm not like the players.
Yeah.
I'm sweating. Like, so imagine those guys can't breathe. It's like 37 degrees Celsius, and you get 98% humidity. So, like, it's actually like people throw up at halftime because they're dehydrated. They're like throwing up, but there's no water to come out. So it's those kind of conditions that actually affects you mentally so much more than the actual competitive nature of football. Playing against the same quality of players. So it's mentally challenging, but it's also something that you have to, come out stronger, and that's why it goes both ways.
Yeah. Wow. So, and then your career started to get real interesting though in 2018. You left New Zealand to join Colorado Rapids in Major League Soccer. Well, you and I have talked about this a lot, but I'm just gonna say I would imagine Anthony Hudson had a big part in that as well. But ultimately, it was your decision to move over here to work in MLS. I would assume, right?
Yeah, I had another opportunity to go to the Qatari League. There was an opening, and obviously, like when those decision times come, like it ultimately decides on like who do you trust.
Yeah.
Like I'm going with the coach that trusts me to do the job, and he gives me faith. So like it's like a no-brainer at the time, and at the same time, I knew that the MLS was like steadily growing. I know it's not at the level that it's at right now because of the Beckham influence. Like everyone knew that MLS was like
that was when it was the MLS was even when you came. It was
a little bit of a limelight, and it wasn't just a normal league. It's just an interesting project that's going on. And obviously the club football level also appealed to me as well. So a lot of things, a lot of factors that mattered, but at the end of the day, working with Anthony again was probably the biggest decisive factor.
what I do wonder though, but because you were in New Zealand, did you ever think about taking a crack at the Australian League or working with Australian football?
Nope. I actually thought about having a crack at the Premier League.
So that was, but what I'm saying is, I mean, yeah, like that was probably your goal, but like
I would say Australian League would
Yeah.
have been my last option. Like,
so it wasn't really
if I had
your what,
all these other ones,
right?
and if it didn't work out, I'll fall
Yeah.
back to
Yeah, so it wasn't really a part of your like ideal like vision.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched a lot of the A-League games.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the standards that I've watched, I mean, don't get me wrong, MLS at that time wasn't miles better than the A-League either. But
Mhm.
at the time, because I'm so accustomed to it,
Mhm.
I do think I felt a little bit lesser of it, which is a bit biased in a way. But I always wanted to go to Europe or somewhere abroad and just be out of my comfort zone.
Mhm.
And that was probably one of the biggest reasons. Like, so
And
that's a good stepping stone in my mind at the time.
we talked about this before we started recording here, I guess. But Young Hoon is also somebody who lived in New Zealand as well. I actually found out today. Did you play football there, Young Hoon? Because I know you play football in Korea. Like, what was your football situation like when you lived in New Zealand briefly?
Actually, I'm not sure that I lived there because I was there just a few months because
so it wasn't like a year. Okay.
Yeah. My parents want me to go there so to learn the language. So maybe I'm speaking English because of that experience, but I'm not that good. But and that's it. At that time, I was 13 years old. And actually, I was starting to like football. I didn't have this kind of passion that I have right now. I didn't have that, so I wanted to play football, but in the backyard of the language school, I played in 3-on-3. I played those kind of matches, but I'm not sure that's we can call it match, but I played like that. But except that I didn't have football experience from there.
Jase, let me ask you this. Like people from the New Zealand, like football in New Zealand, how common is it? I'm asking because I really don't know, but how common is it for coaches or analysts from New Zealand to move abroad and have a career like you've had in MLS?
Okay, well, coaches, I think it depends on like more coaches that actually played at a higher level, like say Ryan Nelson coached at Toronto, for example, something like that. Like you've had some experience, like Danny Hay, who's played at like Leeds. I forgot to mention before Darren Baisley. He's a under-20 head coach that recruited me, so I respect him a lot. But he used to play for Wolves, and now he's national team manager for the All Whites right now. So, and also like coaches like Neil Emblem, who used to play in England, top level, like top player. He played for Wolves as well. He played for Wolves and Millwall and, a lot of other teams. And they're the ones that actually end up going to other leagues and whatnot.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is for analysts, there's a load of talent of analysts that comes from Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, I was always fascinated by that though. Why is that?
Because analysis of sport, like team sport, was actually originated in Australia. So it comes from field hockey and Aussie rules. So those guys who became analysts, so-called analysts, they paved the way of that job in the sport, and then it started adapting to rugby, adapting to soccer, started adapting to other sports, and then it just spread from there. And the biggest company of sports analysis right now is called Huddle.
Yeah, and they're based over there, right?
No, Huddle is an American company, but they bought.
Right. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Huddle bought sports tech
Yeah.
from Australia.
Yeah.
Now it's an American company, but
Yeah, so that's
they
that's
used to
what
be-
makes it really interesting. Yeah.
So when I actually first came over to MLS, there was 5 New Zealanders working as an analyst in MLS.
Mhm.
So that just shows you
Yeah.
like why it's probably
Right.
prominent that Kiwis or Australians actually do end up working.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot of like performance analysts or even somebody to do with performance from Australia working in like English Premier League or the rugby, you know.